And tonight we're going to talk about some difficult stuff. We're going to talk about what to do when there's bad merges in tree. And I'm sure we have all experienced that. Okay, so what to do when a merge causes a problem. All the things that we do in tree, this is probably the most challenging situation that we have, where mistakes have been caused by merges and we're stuck with a mess and we have to try to figure out what to do. A lot of merges happen in tree and you never notice them because they're done properly. Everything goes smoothly. Everything's linked. The right people are linked together and it's just seamless and you don't notice it.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Have you hit the continue? Because it's still up on my screen of it being recorded. So I don't know if you're recording yet.
Well, let me see.
You have
You need to hit the continue. You hit the continue. Then you're okay.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Okay, so if things go bad, the kinds of things that happen is people disappear, and it's probably the biggest thing. You go into tree one day and a whole line disappeared. And it's not really that they're all gone, it's that one person got messed up, and then it's like dominoes, everybody behind them goes out of your view too. I mean, all kinds of fun getting this to advance. Okay, sometimes new people are created in tree to replace the missing people. And now when you look at them, you find out they need ordinances, but they had ordinances last week, or they had ordinances 100 years ago. The sources are now gone. Or you find these people that have multiple identities. In other words, they may have more than one set of totally different parents that might even live in different parts of the world, or they'll have a multitude of spouses that they really didn't have. And they weren't necessarily polygamous, yet they're having children with 2 or 3 women at the same time in different parts of the world. Or they may have other information or sources that belong to different people. You'll look at the other information and names will be there that have nothing to do with this person. Or you may see sources for other people. These are all signs that something's wrong. And this can go on and on and on. That's just some ideas. So we need to understand a little bit about what happens in a merge. Essentially in a merge, you're going to take 2 records and you're going to combine them into one. And essentially what you want to do is you want to take from the duplicate record, which is usually a lesser record. It has less total data connected to it than the primary record you're working with. You're going to take out of that duplicate record everything you can and move it over into the primary record. And when the merge is finished, that primary record becomes the only record of these 2 that you will see. And that old duplicate record becomes what they call archived. It's not really deleted. It's going to say it's been deleted, but that's not really totally true. It's been archived. It's been put up on the shelf. And the only way you can get to it to see it is if you know its ID number. If you search for it by ID, you'll be able to find it. But if you search for it by name, by any of the other normal ways, you won't be able to see that record. And so this is what's happening in the merge. And what we're hoping is that this primary merged record represents the same person as the primary record began with, and maybe just has some more stuff added to it. Now, not all merges go good though. And so we have to try to fix them. There's 2 different ways to fix them. One of them is called Unmerge. Unmerge works only if after the merge, no other changes are taking place before you discover the problem. This is good for the person who made the merge. If you merge somebody and then immediately say, oh, wait a minute, I shouldn't have done this, you can go right in there and you can unmerge the records. Put them right back where they were. Unfortunately, most of the time, when we finally discover a bad merge, a lot of stuff has been going on with that record after the merge, and FamilySearch can no longer guarantee exactly who goes where, what goes where in all cases for these records. And so what they'll let you do instead is to restore that archived record, that record that was the duplicate before, and they will restore that record. That's what you usually will see. I'll show you one example of Unmerge, and the rest of them, all the rest of these tonight will be restore situations. Okay, so what happens in a restore? That's always the big question. Well, the system will try to recreate the old duplicate record. And I mean recreate it to as close to exactly what it was before as possible. And it'll take that archived record, try to restore it back to the way it was, and then make it viewable for everybody, make it visible. The ordinances are returned to it. The system does know what ordinances went with which ID. So ordinances can go back, and they will go back. The ones that were attached to the duplicate record, it'll be removed from that merged record and put back in the duplicate. The facts that you took from this record, the dates or places or other information that you remove from it to put on that merged record, will be put back on this record. And then depending upon the situation, the sources may or may not be returned. That's a biggie. A lot of times you'll find the duplicate or the sources come back just fine, but a lot of times they don't. And so you're going to have to then go and detach sources and reattach them. Is going to be a mess. And then lastly, the relationships. Those relationships that you remove from that archived record, like the wife or children or parents, are going to be moved back to this record so that it will have the relationships attached to it that it had prior to the merge. And so those are the things that go on when you try to restore a record. Now, what if your restored record is such a mess that it comes out different than what you want? In other words, you restore a record and what you see in that record is just a zoo. It's a messed up record. It's got all kinds of problems. And you're thinking, now what do? I've really got a problem. Well, in that case, the best thing to do is just merge it back in and leave it there, or you can leave it out on its own as a messed up record. But you can always put it back. If you restore something, you don't like what you see when you restore, then just merge it back into the record you took it out of. So at least it's where people think it goes, where you think the information goes. That's the nice thing. There's always a fallback of some kind. So even though this can be a very destructive process, there's always something you can do to at least get back to where you were before you started. So you don't need to worry. I would say one thing, I didn't put it on any slide here. Whenever I'm doing this, I have a notebook and I have a pen, and I'm writing things down as I go, because things can start getting complex, let's say. Okay, now, there are times when you really can't restore what you want. You're trying to get something, you want to have something show, maybe an ordinance or a relationship or something, and you just can't get that to appear. And part of that is because some records are like layers of an onion. There's records, inside records, inside records. There's merges and then merges of the merged records and merges of those records. And some of these records can have, you'll see a person, but inside that person's record could be 150 other records that were merged together to make this person. And you're looking for that one record, and you may never be able to actually find it. Some things are buried so deep. I did several examples tonight, and I deliberately left in ones where I wasn't able to get exactly what I wanted, because I want you to see for reality what happens. The other part of the problem is there's this brick wall, and that's called 2012 and New Family Search, New Family Search. When they turned off New Family Search and moved all those people, those billions of people that were in New Family Search into Tree, they froze those records. And prior to when they moved them into Family Tree, we could go in there and actually do more unmerging and more digging for ordinances and things like that than we can do today in Tree. But those records that came over from Tree can't be broken up. And so sometimes you're going to be looking for an ordinance, and it's going to be buried in a record that is poorly merged, but there's absolutely nothing you can do about it yourself as a patron, because that record is frozen. It can't be broken down anymore because it came over this way from New Family Search. In that case, you go to FamilySearch support and you get the missionaries and data quality to go look for the ordinance that you need, if it's something you really absolutely need. Okay, so here's an example of a merge that looks bad. And when I first came to Peter York one day, I went to him because it said on my watch list that there had been a merge. And so I came over and I really wasn't paying much attention, didn't really catch anything until I looked down and I saw at the bottom the person's reason for the merge. Reason for information is correct is they both have a lot of information. And at that point, I started thinking, this person might not know what they're talking about. So I looked at these two Peter Yorks that were merged. And I realized, okay, they're two guys with the same name. One's born in 1779, the other one's born in 1880 or 1833. That doesn't sound like the same person. They both died fairly close in years, within 3 years of each other, but there's something wrong. And I hadn't really even looked at Peter's record at this point. Peter's one of my ancestors, the Peter that's up at the top of the screen, the 1779 guy. So I said, okay, let's go look at this a little bit more. And so I decided I want to see if I can find this Peter 1833 guy. And so I went over into Ancestry because he wasn't there in Family Search anymore. And I figured I found him because there's a John York who's married to a Margaret Burnhams, and he's a cousin of mine somehow. And they had a son, Peter, born in 1833 and died in 1865. Those are the dates for that record that was merged in. And I thought, well, now this is nice. This is a tree. Are there any documents to prove this? And so I went looking, and sure enough, I found an 1850 census for John York and his wife, Margaret, and Peter's age 16. And so this is definitely my guy that needs to be restored in FamilySearch. Okay, so this is a bad merge. It needs to be undone. So when I went to look at my Colonel John York, this is my ancestor and my ancestor's wife and his family. This is the Peter that we're talking about, and his father's John and Abigail. But then here's Peter also with Father John York and Margaret Burnham's. So it really worked out nice that whoever did this merge brought over in the merge the parents that this duplicate record really goes to. So he's still connected to his right parents. So what I need to do is just pull that merged record out of the Peter 1779 record, and everything should work out just nice. So when I clicked on Peter and went to his merges, this is that merge record. I'm going to go click on Unmerge, because this is one of those merges that I caught right away. Nothing's been done to this record since the merge. So I can do the easiest type of fix there is, unmerge. And it'll just totally undo this merge without any other work on my part. It'll tell me, okay, this is what you're doing. One person, and I don't understand why they have unknown names there, but one person's the 1833 to 1865, and the other one's my ancestor, 1779 to 1862. And so I'm saying, yes, I want to unmerge this. So all I have to do is click on merge. And when I'm done, they are unmerged. And it says here that I have restored that other Peter York record. So did everything sort out? Okay, well, my Peter York now is just in with his parents. There's no other set of parents. There's no other wife or things like that. And the other Peter York went back to the John York and the Burnham gal into their family. And so that was just easy. You wish they were all that way. Now, a lot of times, if you're like me and you've been digging around a lot, there's ordinances involved in this situation, and you've lost ordinances. And it helps a little bit to understand the complexity of ordinances in tree. Okay, and we need to go back to the old days. That's the days before 1969, when they started to computerize, or at least digitize records to a degree. Prior to that time, ordinances were all kept in books that were at the temple. And these books kept track of ordinances that were done by ordinance, not by person. They recorded the person who that had the ordinance done for them, but they didn't gather together the person's ordinances. They had a book for baptisms and confirmations. When John's baptism and confirmation were done, it was entered in the baptism and confirmation book. Then some other time, when his initiatory and endowments were done, that was entered in yet another book. And then there were books for sealings, sealings to parents, sealings to spouses, living ordinance sealings, and things like this, all in different books. And those books had to become digitized. And so as they were digitized, they were not able to bring these people all together. Some of the time they could, but essentially there would be 4 records in FamilySearch for every person who's had their ordinances done prior to 1969. The thing is, though, some of our people were done 30 or 40 times. So it's 30 or 40 times 4 number of people floating around in the database that all represent the same person. And this is why there's such a mess trying to get all of this stuff coordinated together. Okay, it takes a lot of work. Fortunately, today, they track things a lot better, and we don't have all these duplicates. But it reaches a point often where there are so many problems, so many records for this person, that you really need the family search people to help you fix things if you're trying to find a specific ordinance. But we'll show you, you can try to do it and get away with it a lot of times. So here's a case, the case of Grace Gilman, AKA Alice Carty. Two totally different names. I have an ancestor, John Gilman, and he was married to a Grace York. That should say Grace York instead of Grace Gilman. Grace York. And they had several children. He has a brother, Daniel, and Family Search, they've already got the kids for the two brothers mixed up. Well, the problem with John Gilman is he has Grace York for a wife, and he also has an Alice Carty. The problem is Alice Carty is not his wife. She's the wife of his brother, Daniel. And so we're trying to figure out what was going on here with Alice Carty floating around here attached to John Gilman, and try to see if we can, flesh out what's going on. And it appears that Grace York's record's been merged multiple times. So I went first thing to Alice Carty's name log, because I always want to see what was this person's real name in the history of Family Search. And this record was made in 2019. She started out as Grace York, Alice York, then she went to Alice, back to Grace Alice York, to Grace York, to Alice, to now Alice Carty. Well, that kind of tells me right there, this record probably really isn't Alice Carty. Buried in here is probably a lot of Grace York stuff, just by looking at the way the name history shows. Okay, so I go looking at Alice Carty's merges, 21 merges. And so you'd find these by going over to latest changes. And then I clicked on merges. And then I found these three that were really interesting to me, because you'll see the deleted person, Grace York, and Grace Alice York. So 3 times they've deleted a Grace York record into this Alice Carty record. Okay, and the next screen has the record of Grace York that is showing in Family Search right now. So I call that the real Grace York record. Okay, my hope is that I can find more data about Grace York over in these deleted people, and hopefully fill in the Grace York record that's being used right now, that real Grace York record. So the current Grace York record looks like this. She's connected to John Gilman, her husband. She's a child in the family of Richard York and Elizabeth. Everything looks fine until I look at her ordinances. And her ordinances are all done in 1998 and 2019. Whereas all of her brothers and sisters over here were done in the period of 1920 to 1937. And Grace should have those dates in her ordinance list too. So somewhere along the way, they've removed some of Grace York's records, and those records have those early ordinances. And my thought is they're in those records that went into Alice Carty's record, were merged into Alice Carty and then deleted. So we'll look at some of those merges, those 3 Grace York ones. So here was one merge that was this Grace York here into Alice Carty back in June of 2020. And what I do is I click on Grace, and when I click on Grace and then person, I actually get a page. I don't get a thing there that says this has been deleted. This is the record that they're using right now in Family Search for Grace York. So somebody came along and unmerged it. But the strange thing is, it's not showing anywhere in the change log for Alice. There was no place where it said that Grace York was restored after a merge. But that's the record that shows in the pedigree right now. Okay, so I'll go to the next one. Grace York here, merged into Alice Carty. And we'll try the same process. I'll click on Grace York, click on person, and I get what I expect, the person deleted screen. That means this record has been archived. So what can I do? I just click on person. I go down here at the bottom and I click on person, even though it says it's been deleted, and I get a screen like this where it says person deleted. It was deleted in a merge. The surviving person's Alice Carty. I know that. I just want to restore this record to Grace York. So I go and click on restore person. And it asks me to give a reason. And I say, well, Grace York is not Alice Carty. I restored this Grace York record and will merge it into her main record. And then I click restore. And when it comes out, this is what I get. It's a Grace York who's married to John Gilman. That's what I would expect to see. And this is what I want. If I make a restore, I hope the relationships are what I'm expecting to see here. This is correct. These are her parents. I now see that there are two Grace Yorks in the family, and I'm going to need to merge them together. Because that's the one thing about this, as you pull out records, if you pull out several of them, they've all got to be merged together into a correct record. So that looks good. All the relationships are okay. And when I go look at her ordinances, I'm very happy because I have better ordinance dates for baptism and confirmation, 1978. I still don't have those baptism confirmation dates right, but here are those original records of hers. Her 1937 initiatory and endowment, her 1921 sealing to parents. And so those things are all there. And I've gotten some earlier dates for the others, even though they aren't exactly what I was hoping for. You don't usually get all the early ordinances out of one record. So I'll go ahead and I'll merge the other two that were listed. When I pulled out the next one, Grace Alice York, I didn't get what I wanted. I got Grace Alice York connected to Daniel Gilman. Well, that's really Alice Carty, who's the wife there. And so this Grace Alice York is not really Grace York as far as I can see, as far as the relationship goes with the husband, because those are Daniel's kids, according to FamilySearch. So, I went and looked at the records, listed duplicates, and I could see the record began as a Grace York. It had several Alice Carty records added. And since this record started as a Grace York, I can't really remove her from her own record. I have to remove the Alice Cartys from it. So I went through and laboriously took out 4 Alice Cartys, merged them with the Alice Carty who is in tree right now as the other wife to Daniel Gilman. And when I got done, I realized that this record, this Grace Alice York record, was really just Alice Carty's. I changed her name on it, merged them all together and got them out of the way. It was very disappointing. I was hoping I'd find more early ordinance work for Grace York, but it didn't work that way. So Grace Alice York became Alice Carty for real. Okay, some bad merges are really hidden. The following case is an example of a hidden bad merge that took investigation to unravel. You work through your tree, keep eyes out for weird relationships and information on people that just doesn't fit them. And this is a case about missing ordinances again. We're going to review a Cornell family of mine. I came upon an ancestor who had all dark blue ordinance boxes, which was interesting because his work was done over 100 years ago, or nearly 100 years ago. And when I saw those ordinance boxes, I knew there was a problem. So that's where the issue began. So I came to Richard Cornell, married Elizabeth Jessup. His father's Thomas Cornell and Rebecca Briggs. They're my ancestors. So Richard's one of my great some number uncles. And I noticed that his ordinances were all in progress. And that made no sense. Every other child over on the right-hand side has ordinances done 100 years ago, or nearly 100 years ago. And his are all needing to be done? I don't think so. And so we need to try to find out what's going on. So I looked at his record changes. And that's always the place to go when you want to try to see if you can figure out what's happening. So I look at the change log, and all I can see is that this was a record that was created the 15th of November, 2020. So somebody came along and said, whoa, this guy's missing. So let's create a record for him. They did the logical thing that somebody who maybe doesn't have a lot of experience in tree, doesn't know how to do anything else, but to create a record to fill in that empty space. And so I searched for similar individuals, and I couldn't get any Richard Cornells to show up. So something's happened to poor Richard. And so I looked at the change log on this person, and I could see right away that there's a strange situation. There had been a merge in December of 2020 where they merged a Richard Cornell into John Cornell. And then one of my cousins, Cherry Mason, came along. He said, oh, wait a minute, that makes no sense. So he had unmerged this Richard Cornell that had been merged in so that we had that record back. It was one that had just been made, and somebody came right along and deleted it right away by merging it into John Cornell. They had some idea that there was no Richard, there was only a John Cornell. It's the only thing I can figure. So on December 2nd, 2022, someone merged the Richard into the record of John. And then 2 months later, he was restored. This is that new record, though, and there's no ordinances. Terry Mason didn't carry out the full thing. He just restored a person with the right name and said, I'm through, I'm finished. Okay, so this is the John Cornell record that I think has hidden Richard information in it. And so what I want to do is see if I can figure out what's going on here. I look at the record, I look at the change log, I look at the relationships. He's got the wife, Ellen Barker, that goes to Richard. He has 22 sources, and most of them go to Richard. He has 17 collaborations, most of them pertain to Richard. And he's got ordinances, and I'm guessing if everything else goes to Richard, the ordinances will probably go to Richard too. So when I look at those ordinances, those are early ordinances in the church, and they all fit the family for Richard. His siblings were all sealed to their parents on the 18th of March, 1942 in the Logan Temple. So Richard should have been sealed then too, not John, because John's in another family. So we need to see what we can do. So I'm going to go to the change log, and I love that you can filter it. You click on filter and I get a big long list, and you click on merges and it shows you just the merges. And it brings up 15 of them. And so I've shown just a few here. I'll look at these one at a time, and I'm going to pull the Richard back out of the John. Look at this, it's so consistent. Merge Richard into John, merge Richard into John, merge Richard into John. We need those Richards back, because Richard and John are two different people. So not all the duplicates need to be restored again. I clicked on one of them, and sure enough, it's the Richard that's showing in the pedigree chart. So he's not really deleted at this point. So I go to the next one, and it says person deleted. So I go ahead and I click on the person tab, and I restore them, and I do this 14 times. And I'm not going to bore you with all of them. I went through each and every one of these. And the first one that I came to said it was Richard Cornell with Elizabeth Jessup. Now that's good, because that's who Richard's supposed to be married to. When I see the relationship tied to the record that I restore being correct, you can feel comfortable that that record's an actual record. Then there was the bonus, the ordinances. Here's the baptism and confirmation early ordinances. And then some 1999 for initiatory and endowment. And that's a little better than what we had before, because before we went from 1999 to 2013. Now I've got 1932 for some and 1999 for some. Okay, after 5 restores, I had all the ordinances for this guy that I needed. I still went through and did the rest, because the rest of them were still Richard's, and I needed all that put together so that Richard has all of his records, all of his sources, and things like that, because there are other things that are important, not just the ordinances. It took an evening's worth of work, but when I was done, Richard had a good family. Now, could a missing ordinance be from a bad merge? Richard Cornell's family is nice, it's Richard and Elizabeth Jepson, because we have the family Bible from back in the 1600s. So we know the children. We know when they were born. We know who's in the family. And there's early connections into the church. So the work was done a long time ago. And then I go look at child Thomas. Thomas died at the age of 6, and he has a blue sealing to parents, which means it's missing. Well, my first thought on this is, I know there's a temptation for people when there's 2 children with the same name in a family, they merge them together, because who would name 2 children Thomas? You know, genealogists that don't really do much research. People that are just starting often don't realize that families, when a child died, they named another child with the same name. So usually this record will be found over in the other Thomas Cornell record. So I figured, okay, I'll find it. We'll fix everything up. So I went over to that other Thomas, what I call the younger Thomas, the one that was born second, that lived to be an adult. And there's several Thomas Cornells merged into Thomas Cornell. And the one that looked the most promising was the one on the bottom, because the birth date for that one has the birth date of the older brother. So I said, let's restore that. When I pulled it out, I didn't get what I wanted. It pulls out with the senior Thomas Cornell and 3 of his children. And the ordinances for Thomas are between 1999 and 2000. And the sealing was done in 1948. That could be for this Thomas, it could be for the other Thomas, and there's nothing I can do about it. So I tried to restore the others, and I couldn't find anything that worked. Checking this record, I figured, okay, I pulled this record out. Let's look at its change log and see if I can find where another record was merged into it that would be the brother. But there's no record of it because this record came to us from New Family Search. So I'm stuck. There's absolutely nothing I can do to find that missing ordinance for that little baby, short of contacting Family Search and saying, help me find it. And so we could do that, or we could just let it ride and somebody's going to be doing it. And it'll be a duplicate ordinance, but the work will be done and it'll be showing. But it really is done. That's the sad thing. So I just put the records back where they were and left them alone because there really wasn't anything I could do. This record here belongs to the senior Thomas, so let's leave it with the senior Thomas. Okay, one last missing ordinance. I have a fun hotbed in my pedigree. I have a third grade uncle, William Givens, and there's this other William Givens that everybody under the sun wants to put in the family. They're two totally different guys. The guy on the right's not even a blood relative. By DNA, he doesn't even fit. And this William, my third grade uncle, his work should have been done back in the 1930s. And so when I look at his records, now everything's showing 1913 to 1917, or 2013, 2017. So he's lost his ordinances. So I go look at merges. Now, the one nice thing is these other people keep wanting to put Robert as a middle name for their William, the wrong guy, the other guy that's not related. So that kind of helps me to see where people are. Well, there's 16 merges in that other Williams record. But this was the one that caught my eye because it's got the dates for the William that belongs in my part of the tree. So I decided I would restore it. When it came out, it looks okay. John is the father. The John born in 1719 to 1790 is the father of this William. So that looks good. But the ordinances were still in the 2012, 2013 range. So I couldn't do anything about it. I tried every way, shape, and form, but they're just buried somewhere. So the only thing to do is contact Family Search. Okay, one other that I stumbled upon by accident. I was just looking around in my tree and I came to a situation where Elizabeth M. Craig, the wife in these two families, is my ancestor. Okay, she's my second or third great grandmother. She married John Givens. This John Givens and Elizabeth Craig are my ancestors. And this is my great grandfather, John Craig Givens. Okay, they're from Kentucky, moved to Missouri. Well, I went in the tree and it told me that Elizabeth had another family and another husband named John, but it's a different John. You notice the circles on their ID numbers. They're totally different Johns. Okay, they're similar in dates, almost identical, but this family is totally different than the family over here. And this family over here are people that were born in South Carolina for the most part. And I even found a newspaper clipping that's a court order to sell the property after this John died and his wife Elizabeth, who lived in Florida and named these children, needed to liquidate the estate. So I know this is a real family, but they're all hooked together under Elizabeth M. Craig as the mother in both families. So I thought, I'll bet you somebody's merged Elizabeth. So I go to her change log, and sure enough, you find in one place a relationship. Got some talkers in the background. You need to mute. You guys need to mute.
Oh, okay. And then the truck drove over to Yvonne's and he was
Larry, can you mute your mic? we find that Elizabeth M. Craig was added as a spouse to this family, and this Elizabeth was deleted. That means there was a merge going on here between the Elizabeths, and that happened on the 10th of April this year. So I went to the merge log, 10th of April. Here's the merge. So really all I need to do is restore that Elizabeth. So I click on her person, and click on restore her. Give a reason that she's a different person than Elizabeth M. Craig. And when I'm done, she's got her family. And yeah, she's a record with no birth or death information, but neither do some of the children have those. So what I didn't want this to happen again. So in the life sketch for this Elizabeth, I put a note that said, please note, this Elizabeth is not Elizabeth M. Craig, who married John Givens in Kentucky. This couple lived in South Carolina, and at least Elizabeth lived in Florida, so that people won't redo that merge. So I hope this has given you some ideas. I hope it hasn't scared you away, because this is tricky stuff, but it's all very capable of being done. So do we have any questions?
So if more than one person is working on a record,